Hello, I'm here today with the great Jaime Schorr from the great state of Maine. Hello, Jaime.
Hey, David, how are you today?
I am great. I'm looking forward to another Red Sox World Series, as I know you are.
Woohoo!
So really thrilled to have you today on our little show here, and excited to talk to you about your vision for procurement and hear about your background. So maybe to get started, tell us, who you are and what you do, and maybe why you do it.
Thank you. So, David, I am the Chief Procurement Officer for the state of Maine. I have been in this role since 2017. I oversee all procurement for goods, services, materials, technology. As long as it's not construction, it falls to my purview. When I explain what I do to children, I say I buy stuff for a living, and they think it's really great. They always ask me if I can buy Lamborghinis. I said, yeah, I can, but I'm not going to spend your money that way. So that being said, I love procurement. I love what I do. My background, I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I have a Juris Doctorate from the Regent University in Virginia Beach. And lastly, I have a master's in business administration from the New England College. So all of that, right? I love procurement. I love what I do, and I love working with other procurement professionals across the state, across the country, across the globe.
Very good. And speaking of procurement professionals across the country, we'll stop at the border for a minute. I know that you were recently elected by your peers to be the president-elect of NASPO. So maybe for people who don't know what NASPO is, what is NASPO? And what is its mission, and when do you become the czarina of state procurement?
So the National Association of State Procurement Officials is the official title for NASPO. It's an organization that has been around since I'm probably going to get this wrong, 50s. I think it is 1955. And really, it's an organization that is designed wholeheartedly to support procurement professionals of its members. It's collaboration, it's education. There is a cooperative purchasing arm, NASPO Value Point, and our mission is to elevate the public procurement profession, right? It's not a career, it's not a job, it is a profession. Oftentimes when you talk to procurement officers, they have sort of fallen into procurement, but by virtue of the change, right, that NASPO is trying to impose on procurement officials, we are right now a profession, and we will continue to be a profession. And yes, I'm super excited to be elected as, I think my technical title is the NASPO 2022 President-elect, and then I will serve as president in 2023. I'm excited to offer my public service to NASPO, the organization, and public procurement officials across the country.
Very good. So knowing that you have 1 year where basically you will be giving some vision and direction to the organization, I'm sure knowing you, I'm sure you have a number of things that you want to try and get done during that relatively short period of time, which will go fast. So love to hear what maybe your priorities are, to the extent you've been able to think about them a year out.
So having been elected in this position for about 30 days now, I can tell you some high-level topic areas that I want to focus on. One is the educational component and certification. At NASPO, in working in harmony with UPPCC, right? We support the CPPO and the CPPB certification. That's just one level of continuing to elevate the profession, is maintaining certification for our professionals. Secondarily, I would like to be able to add a layer of technology component to that certification, because so often we are tasked with buying technology And there's a whole language out there as it relates to procurement technology between SaaS, PaaS, infrastructure, cybersecurity. It changes minute by minute. So really elevating the education of the procurement profession is a key component of my 2023 presidency. And then secondarily, I want to think about procurement post-COVID. Going into COVID, I think the world sort of had this assumption around procurement that we perform transactions, right? We buy stuff for a living. And I won't deny that we do. There is some level of transactions that are needed in our everyday world. However, post-COVID, with supply chain not bouncing back as quickly as we would want to, there is a level of collaboration that is needed from a local perspective, a state perspective, universities, nationally, and even more so globally. There are many conversations that should be happening from a global perspective so that we are all working together as procurement professionals to influence the supply chain and provide our constituents with what is needed. We all know what it's like to go to the grocery store and not have toilet paper or paper towels, right? That's an uncomfortable situation to be in, of when I would not ever wish a government official to be in the situation where we can't buy the needed supplies, whether it be water bottles, beds, ventilators, et cetera, for our constituents. We save lives and we do it every day.
It's interesting you talk about the cooperation needed through the frame of the sort of COVID environment. I did an interview, maybe it was a year ago, with Gary Lambert, who, as you know, is one of your fellow Red Sox fans and another great New England procurement leader, who was telling me that as they were trying to get PPE out of China, it was like the most closely guarded secret what they were doing, because they were so convinced that the federal government, if they learned what Gary and his team were able to secure, would come in and stop the planes from leaving the airport in China, almost like an action movie. Do you feel, when you talk about collaborating with other states, other municipalities, other countries, like, do you think that that is realistic when there's a time of extreme shortage of supplies and everyone's fighting to get it and knowing there's not enough for everyone? How does that fit into what happened, back last year?
David, I would argue it's not only realistic, it's critical, right? We're coming out of the world's most tight supply chain that we've ever experienced, supply chain disruption at its finest, if you will. It was literally a perfect storm. Everybody was against everybody else, right? Gary and I were competing for the exact same N95 masks. And it wasn't that we didn't want to collaborate, it's that we literally couldn't collaborate for that very reason that Gary said. So let's think about the very power of a cooperative contract. The more folks that come together, the more buying power you have. Well, how is that any different than the US and Canada and Mexico and Spain and Britain? We all come together, we all need the same thing. Let's pool our buying power to really affect the supply chain internationally.
So interesting.
Yeah, and it's done by just collaboration, sitting around the table. I'm not saying we have to dominate the world. I'm saying let's pick some low-hanging fruit. Let's have some collaborative conversations and see if we can affect the market. We all do the same thing, so let's do it together.
It's so interesting. It reminds me a little bit back of my procurement days, which, as you know, was when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. But I remember.
Sorry, I didn't laugh out loud at that, David.
No, it's funny. But I remember clearly. Like, one of my first things that I ever did there was we led, like I'm sure you do in Maine all the time now, but we were doing these procurements where we would say to all the municipalities in Pennsylvania, tell us how much salt you need for the coming winter. And we would buy it on behalf of all the municipalities. We didn't do it for anything else, just for salt, I think, for vehicles, right? But we were able to do exactly what you're saying. We know there's going to be a finite amount of supply, and we know that there's a certain amount of demand. So let's get our story together before the storm hits, whether the storm is a blizzard or whether the storm is another pandemic. And let's pool our volume so we can go back to the suppliers and say, this is the volume of governments nationally or worldwide, as you were saying? Is that sort of the vision, is like, let's figure out what the need is and what the requirements are and then take it to market?
Yeah, I think that's one avenue of collaboration that we should be exploring. I think secondarily, various countries, I'm going to say it right, states have different ways of doing things, localities have different ways of performing procurements, as do we globally. And so the US can have conversations, specifically NASPO, with some of these other countries. How do you buy X, right? And what are your requirements, and what are the problems and challenges that you're seeing? And starting those conversations really brings the issues to the table, and then we can figure out what we want to affect change on. And I can sit here today, right? It's October 13th. We're 11 Fridays away from Christmas. And there is no parents organization getting together to say there's going to be a shortage of Christmas toys, right? But it's the exact same thing that's going to happen. The perfect storm is coming in 11 Fridays when Christmas hits, right? So it's just, it's no different. It's just bringing it to government.
Right. That's such an interesting idea. And so when you think back to NASPO, where we started the conversation, does it feel to you like NASPO is sort of a natural convener of that conversation?
NASPO is the water cooler for procurement, right? They are the natural link between these various organizations. They're the natural link between state governments. They can be the natural link between localities and municipalities, and fostering the collaboration. Absolutely. And so let's add that last piece though, right? The one party that I haven't talked about up until now are the vendors, right? NASPO is also that great way to bring vendors into the mix of the collaboration, because they're ultimately the ones that can help us affect the change.
So true. And I do think that I've enjoyed seeing NASPO's evolution over the years in terms of its relationship with the supplier community and really treating them like partners. And if you think about it, a procurement is not one party, it's two parties. And you have
Absolutely.
suppliers there for it.
At a minimum, two parties. Yes.
Right. I know that one of the things that you've been a real advocate for has been technology. And as you talk about NASPO as sort of a water cooler, which is a really nice, I think, metaphor, what do you see as the role of technology, maybe first in a place like Maine, between the state government and the local governments in Maine? How does technology help bring you closer to your, fellow procurement people in the state? But then, let's talk about that first, and we can expand it to how technology helps make the water cooler like an electric water cooler.
So, David, I can drive 6 hours south and probably show up pretty close to your front door. I drive 6 hours north, I'm still in Maine, right? I'm not driving 6 hours to go meet with my fellow local public procurement officials. So technology, aside from, it started out being Ma Bell, right? I can call somebody and have a conversation with them, right? And now we all do it on technology. We do it behind the screen. We do it on our phone, which we carry around constantly. What if? Pose the what if we created some level of technology that could bring these public procurement professionals together in a collaborative way that fosters conversation, or that just provides a mechanism for them being the locality to look at my contracts easily, to see where I'm going with vendors, to look at SaaS, PaaS, infrastructure, all these things that are, it's its own language, right? And this is my full-time job plus. Some of these folks that are in the localities and municipalities, they do this maybe an hour a week. So they're, coming up to speed. So I would say that there is a level of technology that probably hasn't even emerged on the market yet that is going to bring public procurement professionals together in a collaborative manner. It's like think about Facebook or Twitter, right? For public procurement. It's coming. I don't know what it is yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, there may be some interesting ideas out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about it, beyond the great and massive state of Maine, geographically and stature-wise. And you go back to NASPO as the water cooler. Like, what do you, as the president-elect of NASPO, what is NASPO's role in utilizing technology to bring the profession that you're trying to elevate together?
So I think NASPO's primary mission is to educate, is to teach people and foster the collaboration, right? And they do a great job fostering collaboration for folks in person at conferences, right? Those conferences are fantastic. We all get little snippets of information, but for folks that can't attend the conference, maybe they're international or perhaps they're just too far away, in light of the pandemic and COVID. What if there is a technology out there that can subsequently bring NASPO to the center of procurement conversations, right? And what if NASPO were to offer technology that helped public procurement professionals educate themselves just by sitting at home in their pajamas and clicking a button, right? And now all of a sudden they know, oh, this supplier out in Washington State could help supplier X in Maine. Right. And, Texas is looking for something that Illinois has, right? So again, it's having the right information at the right time to foster what's ultimately needed for the constituents and the taxpayers.
And to what extent do you think that this sort of generational shift towards millennials and Gen Z, is that a accelerant of the adoption of this kind of technology, or is it a hindrance?
Isn't that the most exciting thought ever? We have a bunch of young people coming out of college with these amazing, fresh ideas. You put them in a room with the folks that have been around for a while that understand risk, and the possibilities, David, are endless. I love having the conversation with folks that are fresh out of supply chain. They've got a procurement background from college, and I just think the ideas are amazing. So my thought is that it absolutely accelerates the ideas of technology and promotes the profession that much more. Mm-hmm. I love it.
So to maybe put a bow on this part of the conversation, it's interesting. You have the idea of trying to connect people in the profession and trying to use technology to do it, to foster a conversation that starts locally, goes national, and then goes global. And then you have a wave of millennials who grew up with technology in ways that you and I didn't.
But I guarantee you on your desk right in front of you, you have at least 2 cell phones, right? Because I know I do. Technology's everywhere.
I will say, Jamie, whenever you decide to retire from public service, you can probably have one. But I do know that a lot of people in government do have 2 phones, like their personal phone and their work phone, and I understand that. But it was one of the nice things to go in the private sector was to be able to have 1 phone. But pushing gears a little bit, I know that diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a real priority for you personally and for NASPO, and I think for the profession in general. And I think that's only become even more urgent, as the conversation has moved towards it in the last couple of years. Before we talk about sort of NASPO's role in that, just tell me in your own neck of the woods, beautifully arrayed behind you, what does DEI mean in Maine? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to your organization?
Wow, what a terrific opportunity to share those thoughts. So thank you for that question. Diversity, equity, and inclusion in the state of Maine means simply bringing more vendors to the table to get government contracts, period. Right? It's just as simple as that. So taking that down to the second layer, there are vendors who Maybe it's a women-owned business. Maybe it's a veteran-owned business. They are disadvantaged in some way, shape, or form. Perhaps English is not their first language. And there's an educational component that is our responsibility as public procurement officials to provide that education for how to gain government contracts in our state. And that's my role, is to ensure that these businesses that don't speak English have the opportunity to review the procurement documents in their language that they feel comfortable with, or understanding as a veteran-owned business how they can maintain a contract with the state of Maine and be in compliance with all of our rules, statutes, policies, et cetera. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is simply that. It's diversifying our vendor marketplace that we can reach out to and diversifying the vendors that acquire contracts. Secondarily, I guess I would add to that, there is a level of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, that should happen within the office place, in the procurement office. I'll save that perhaps for another day, but I would just leave that by saying it's important to take a look at the evaluation teams who are actually awarding contracts to make sure that they understand that DEI is a component of our workforce and our marketplace as it stands today.
I love that. And I hear folks talk a lot about trying to have a more diverse supply base and reporting on it, and tracking it, and giving preferences. But your point is really interesting, that maybe it starts with having a diverse procurement staff and evaluation committees who, will maybe be more sensitive to, the challenges of a diverse or small business, particularly one that doesn't speak English as well as others do, on that journey. That's a really interesting connection. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and I would take it a step farther to say preferences probably would not be a reality if our educational component was strong enough and our sensitivity to cultural appropriation was also existent in the workforce, in procurement specifically.
That's so interesting. So think about now NASPO. You think NASPO has a responsibility to, to bring about more diversity in the suppliers that state governments choose, or is that more of a decision that every state should make on its own?
NASPO exists to serve its membership. NASPO can lead by example, no question. So NASPO could be the first entity out there that actively translates their documents into various languages, right? What a profound statement to say, we welcome all folks to take a look at our contracts. I think the states themselves have to be educated around DEI, what the possibilities are, and then the states have to make the choices as to who the suppliers will be on their cooperative contracts, right? Because NASPO and NASPO Value Point don't actually hold the contracts. It's our lead states within the cooperatives. But certainly there's an educational component that NASPO can offer to their membership.
Right. And maybe, it's states that are really prioritizing DEI can use NASPO as a place to convene with others that do.
Absolutely. Yes. And what a terrific opportunity that NASPO offers, for example, at the NASPO Exchange, and bringing in small businesses, right? That's just one additional step that they take to make sure that small businesses are educated around government contracting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Do you feel like sustainability in purchasing is sort of on par in terms of the priority with diversity when it comes to what procurement officers should be looking for when they're doing their solicitations?
Interesting question.
Or not even on par, but like, should it be a priority? And if it is, like, what does that mean? Does that crowd out other priorities, cost, or other things?
Yeah. So should it be a priority? I think a lot of folks would say yes, right? And as a procurement official, my role is to make sure that the state is acquiring best value. I'm sure many other CPOs would say the same thing. They award to best value. My administration defines best value as X. Right. There's
Right.
49 other states plus the District of Columbia that might define best value the same way I do, or they might tweak it a little bit. But ultimately, best value is defined as whatever the state administration wants it to be. And I think in this arena, we are actively looking at ways to preserve, nature, earth, health, all those things, et cetera, right? Look at climate change and electric vehicles, et cetera. But that in encompassing DEI, yeah, that's a sea change for procurement professionals across the board. There's a lot of thought and a lot of conversations that need to happen so that that feels comfortable to everyone.
Is there enough sort of time in the day and bandwidth to be able to tackle all these things at once?
No. No way, David, you absolutely not. But right, if we prioritize what is important to us, then yes, we should be able to set those initiatives, right? For example, the 2022 president-elect of NASPO may say that these top 4 things are a priority. It may be DEI, it may be green, it may be technology. Absolutely. But if the conversations don't start, we will never finish the goal.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like going back to your water cooler analogy, there could be multiple NASPO water coolers, right? A sustainability water cooler and a DEI water cooler and a COVID water cooler, and you can gather at the ones that matter to you.
Absolutely.
So I was lucky enough to join you at the Austin conference, which was a lot of fun, and great to see people. I observed you sort of really working the room and people really gravitating to you and the conversations that everyone had. Does networking come easy to you? Is it something that you've always been good at? Is it something you've had to work at? And how do you think about that?
As I answer this, you're going to be particularly surprised, as most people are. I am an incredible introvert.
No way.
I know I am. So if you ask me to go out to a party on a Friday or Saturday night, I'm going to say, nope, I'm good. I got my pajamas. I got my book. I got my kids. I'm going to hang out. But the interesting part, right, in a room full of procurement professionals, there's a common language among all of us. And I appreciate the opportunity to see folks that I haven't, in this case, I hadn't seen in probably 2 years. And the conversations are incredibly natural. So networking in general does not necessarily come easy for me personally, but having that mutual conversation is very helpful. And I appreciate the opportunity. I welcome folks to come have a conversation with me if there's questions about procurement or about the state of Maine or, Christmas presents that I'm buying for my kids. Come chat with me, right? I'm happy to share my wisdom, what little I have, and or opinions, which I have a lot of.
My last question for you, maybe riffing on the networking part and connecting with different stakeholders, is, for as long as I can remember, people in procurement have been asking for and demanding a seat at the table. It's been we've talked about this for a long time, and I feel like we're sort of getting it. People understood how important procurement was during COVID. How important do you think it is that we maintain a seat at the table, and how do we keep it, and how do we lose it? What would happen if we lost that seat at the table?
So if you think back to January of 2019, you couldn't order all of your groceries online. And it felt really uncomfortable to get out of your car in the middle of a snowstorm and go get your groceries, right? For those of us that live in the Northeast, that's not a fun feeling when you run out of milk and it's the middle of a blizzard, right? Nobody wants to go back to those days. Government procurement professionals are the exact same opinion. We don't want to go back to the ways of January of 2019, pre-COVID. We are here. People recognize the importance of procurement to accomplish their goals and initiatives, whether political or not. right? And that's what procurement professionals want to maintain, that seat at the table, so that we can help administrations or, spend taxpayer dollars accordingly, right? That's where we need to stay in order to accomplish the goals of any procurement office. How do we stay there? We stay in the conversations and we continue to provide quality guidance. We continue to offer procurement guidance, knowledge around the marketplace, knowledge around vendors, such that we acquire best value in our contracts. How do we lose it? Well, just that. We stop showing up to the table, right? Because there's an obvious importance of procurement. And I think the entire world, right? I can't think of a day in the past year that I haven't seen a news article come out about supply chain or how we're buying masks or how we're doing this, how we're doing that. It's all about procurement. And I go back to that water cooler. To accomplish the goals of state government or any government, procurement needs to be at the table.
And just as you describe yourself as an introvert, I think a lot of people in procurement are really good at getting their job done, and at times too good at keeping their head down. And I think this is a great opportunity for you and for NASPO to lead and to keep our heads up and just keep that seat at the table.
Yeah.
Well, Jaime, this has been terrific. Love talking to you as always. Congratulations on your victory. And it's great news for the procurement profession to have you leading and sharing your vision and energy with the world. So congratulations to you. Thank you for all the time that you're going to put into this new endeavor, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you, David. See you at the World Series. Go Red Sox.
Let's go.